Okay, so last lecture, it was all about DNA, how DNA copies itself, makes a copy of itself, because without DNA replicating, there will be no cell division, no growth, no reproduction. So for any reproduction at the level of cells, DNA has to replicate. That means DNA has to duplicate. Now in this chapter, we are going to understand gene expression. Okay, DNA simply replicating itself is not producing the traits that you see outside. So for the traits to occur, the DNA has to be converted to protein, because it is the proteins that are going to do the work, and the proteins produce the traits. So from DNA to protein is a process, and we call it the central dogma. This is the flow of genetic information at the level of, at the molecular level or at the level of cells. So you see here, if the entire pink thing is a cell, then this blue circular thing is the nucleus inside the cell, the controlling center. And inside the nucleus, you have the genetic material, the DNA. You see the spiral staircase, the DNA double helix. So how does genetic information flow? The DNA stays inside the nucleus, and from time to time, it replicates itself. That means it doubles itself, makes a copy, so that the DNA is never damaged, or it always stays undamaged, stays there for you. And then DNA also makes a photocopy of itself that it can export out. And this copying process is known as transcription. And by transcription, DNA makes RNA, ribonucleic acid. There are some differences between DNA and RNA, but more or less RNA is like a copy of DNA with some variations. And this RNA is allowed to go out of the nucleus. DNA is not allowed to go out of the nucleus. It's precious, so it stays protected inside the nucleus. RNA moves out of the nucleus into the cytoplasm. You see here the cytoplasm. And in the cytoplasm, with the help of ribosomes, okay, and with some other RNAs that stay in the cytoplasm, this RNA is known as mRNA. M stands for messenger. Messenger RNA is made here in the nucleus. The messenger RNA moves out, and then it takes the help of ribosomes. It also takes the help of two more RNAs, and it makes proteins. And it is the proteins that will do all the work, and they will produce the traits. So from gene expression, DNA, we always start with DNA. The part of DNA that codes for a protein, okay, not all of your DNA are coding for protein. Actually, most of the DNA are not coding for proteins. Most of the DNA are regulatory regions. That means they are controlling the activity of other parts of DNA. And that part of the DNA which is coding for a protein is known as exome. So exome is smaller than the whole genome. Genome is all of your DNA, all of your genes together, while exome is only those genes or that part of the DNA that are coding for proteins. And most of the other DNA, that means genome minus exome equals the regulatory genes. These are the ones that do not code for proteins. In the human genome, we have only about 21,000 protein encoding genes. The rest are regulatory genes. So the process by which mRNA is made from DNA is known as transcription. And then from RNA, from mRNA, when protein is made, that process is known as translation. So you see here, there are 3 steps of genetic information flow, or the central dogma. DNA replication, from DNA to RNA transcription, and from RNA to protein is translation. That means RNA is acting as a bridge between DNA and protein. How is RNA made? If RNA is a photocopy of DNA, that means DNA, it has to start from DNA. It has to copy base by base. So DNA, because it is double helix, it has to be separated. One strand of DNA will act as a template strand from which RNA will be made. The other strand, which is not really making the RNA, is known as the coding strand. When DNA was replicating, we had talked of an enzyme called DNA polymerase that was helping. Now for transcription, for RNA to be made from DNA, that enzyme is known as RNA polymerase. So you see here, from replication, the next step is transcription. We are done with replication in last chapter. At this transcription stage, if the blue double helix is DNA and this light greenish one is the RNA, you see that the DNA 2 strands have been separated. See how the strands were complementary. Whenever there was A here, there was a T here. There was C here, there's a G here. When it's an A here, there's a T here. So if in exam, I give you a sequence of one strand of DNA, and I say, let's say one strand of DNA is A, T, T, G, C, G, A, and then give me the complementary strand of DNA. It's very easy. You see the sequence, right? If it starts with an A, then the complementary base would be T. If after A, if there is C, then you will put G, and so on. So you just follow the base, complementary base pairing rule, and you can easily write what would be the sequence of the other DNA if you know the sequence of one strand of DNA. Similarly, if you know the sequence of DNA, you can also predict the sequence of RNA, what is going to be made, because RNA is photocopy, but there's just one difference. Whenever there is, instead of a T, the RNA has a U. So if this is an A here on DNA, if this was a DNA, we would have had a T here. But because it is an mRNA, instead of T, we will put a U here. So C, you see G. A, again, instead of T, we put U. G, C. If it's a T, we can easily put A because A is present in mRNA. It is only the T's which are replaced by U's in mRNA. So this would be the DNA template strand, and that is the coding strand. That means your genetic material, the nucleic acid that is present in the nucleus, there are two types, DNA and RNA. DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid and RNA stands for ribonucleic acid. Both are like tall towers made up of Lego blocks. Each of that Lego block is a nucleotide, and each nucleotide is made up of a sugar, a phosphate, and nitrogenous bases. But there are some differences in what type of sugar or what type of nitrogenous bases. So this is a table showing you the difference between DNA and RNA. DNA, first point is DNA is double-stranded. RNA has only a single thread. Instead of a thymine in DNA, the RNA has a uracil. The DNA has a sugar which is deoxyribose. The RNA has a sugar which is ribose. Okay. DNA is very stable. It persists. RNA is a temporary structure, transient. It's very unstable. When we are working with DNA or RNA in the lab, so if I have DNA, I don't have to worry about keeping it on my lab desk for a long time. But if it's an RNA, I know it's going to degrade very fast. So I have to be very careful when I work with RNA, because RNA gets contaminated very easily. Now there are three types of RNA in our cells. The messenger RNA, which is formed from DNA in the nucleus and gets transported outside. Then there is ribosomal RNA. This type of RNA actually makes the ribosomes. Ribosomes are made up of ribosomal RNAs. And there is a transfer RNA, which works as an interpreter between nucleic acid and proteins, because proteins have to understand the language of nucleic acids in order for the proteins to be formed. So we will start with the messenger RNA or the mRNA. When usually people say RNA, by default they mean mRNA, okay? But specifically, yes, this is the messenger RNA which is made in the nucleus. Now these mRNAs are about, you see this much long, and if you see the base sequence of the mRNAs, if you take three consecutive mRNA bases, those are known as codons. Okay, that is the language of nucleic acid. So for example, let's say the mRNA is starting with an AGC, then AGC, U, G, A, and so on. So those first three, then you take the next three, then you take the next three, those each, when you take subsets of those three bases, subsequent bases, then those are known as one codon each. Now, ribosomal RNAs are the second type of RNAs. They make the ribosomes along with proteins. They also work as enzymes called ribozymes. So this is what a ribosome looks like. It looks like a shape of 8, the figure, the number 8. There is a small subunit and a large subunit. So when we draw it in simplified way, we simply draw it as two circles, one on top of each other. And these are made up of ribosomal RNA and proteins. And the third type of RNAs are the transfer RNAs. These are the interpreters. Why? Because when the DNA is making the RNA and the RNA is coming out, of the nucleus into the cytoplasm, then the protein has to be made according to the order carried by the ribosomes. Now let's say proteins are different things. They speak German, and let's say RNA are speaking English. So somebody has to be there to interpret the English and convert it into German so that proteins can be made. And that interpretation work is being done by tRNAs. They serve as, an interpreter between the language of nucleic acids and the language of proteins. Now the 2D shape, two-dimensional shape, we usually draw it in the form of a clover leaf shape, while three-dimensional analysis has shown that it looks like an inverted L. How does it speak the language of nucleic acids and proteins? On one end of the tRNA is what is known as an anticodon, or in other words, we call it a NODOC, N-O-D-O-C, anticodon or NODOC. This anticodon would be complementary to the mRNA codon. So if the mRNA has AGG, okay, on that side, and a tRNA would come which would have an anticodon which would be complementary to AGG, so it would be UCC. So this is how the tRNA on one side would pair with an mRNA, and on the other side there is a binding site for an amino acid. An amino acid is a building block of proteins. So the tRNA also has, let's say, imagine tRNA has two arms. With one arm it can bind to the mRNA, with the other arm it can grab onto a small protein, an amino acid, and bring it here, and then it will help the mRNA, it will join the amino acids as per the order coming from the mRNA. So this is how the tRNA looks in the two-dimensional structure. You see this part is the anticodon, this is the mRNA binding site, and on this side, this other part is the amino acid accepting end. That means this is the place where it will bring in an amino acid. So let's say this light green is an mRNA strand with the sequence AUG, GGA, UGU. So this mRNA has to make a protein, and as I said, 3 consecutive bases make one codon. So this is one codon, codon number 1, codon number 2, codon number 3. Now this tRNA here, simply shown like this tRNA here needs to have an anticodon UAC complementary. So only that tRNA which has this particular anticodon can come and bind here. No other tRNA will bind here because it has to be complementary base pairing. And this tRNA, when it has a UAC, will always have this amino acid. This is methionine. So methionine amino acid will come. Amino acids are building blocks of proteins. Now, the second codon here on mRNA is GGA. That means out of all the tRNAs that are floating in the cytoplasm, only that tRNA can come that has an anticodon complementary to this, CCU. And then this particular tRNA will bring a specific amino acid, GLY stands for glycine. So glycine amino acid will come. Similarly, the third one. So this is how you see, depending on the order coming from the mRNA, one by one amino acids are being brought in. And finally, these amino acids, methionine, glycine, cysteine, will join with each other and they will form a very simple protein, the first, infant protein. And they will form bonding with each other and they will form the first version of a protein. So how does transcription start? It is different in what you see in bacteria and what you see in higher organisms. So in bacteria, there are certain part of the genes which are called operons. They control the gene expression. In human beings and other complex organisms, we have transcription factors. Transcription factors means they are special type of proteins that control the starting and stopping of mRNA transcription, that control gene expression. So how does that happen? There are 3 steps in transcription. Initiation means beginning, elongation means lengthening the chain, and termination means ending. So if you see here, this blue line is, let's say, a DNA. And this part, this is known as the Tata box because there's a particular sequence here. This part is called the promoter of a gene. That means a sequence which is kind of like a flag for here. This is where in the DNA the transcription has to start. So when this is a flag, this is a promoter region, a protein would come, the Tata binding protein, and it would stick here. And when the Tata binding protein binds to the promoter region, this is a signal for a transcription factor to come and bind to this. It forms a complex. So where is this complex formed? At the promoter region. Which part of the promoter region? Where there is a Tata sequence. So the Tata binding protein plus the transcription factor will come and it will bind here. So now this is a clear signal that RNA transcription is going to start. So this is the enzyme RNA polymerase that will immediately be attracted here. It will come here and it will start transcribing RNA. So then the next step is elongation. So let's again try to understand it from the figure. So this blue structure is the DNA. Okay, this was the promoter region. This purple thing is the RNA polymerase enzyme, which has combined here. That the two DNA strands have been separated. And as the RNA polymerase combined here, new nucleotides are being added, the green ones, and a strand of RNA is being synthesized. And because RNA is single-stranded, we don't have to worry about two strands. So this is initiation. In elongation, the RNA polymerase moves, keeps moving. You see the arrow, the pink arrow. So the RNA polymerase will move in this direction and it keeps adding more and more nucleotides to this green chain. So this RNA molecule that is being formed is getting elongated. And the RNA polymerase enzyme will continue to move down the length of the DNA until it reaches a terminator signal. Okay, so there is a particular sequence which indicates to the RNA polymerase that stop, you have to stop here. So when this RNA polymerase reaches the terminator sequence, the RNA polymerase gets dislodged from its binding. And that is when this RNA molecule that has been synthesized, it is clipped from this DNA and it is released into the nucleus so that it can now move into the cytoplasm. So this is termination, initiation, elongation, termination. And now this green RNA mRNA molecule is free to move out from the nucleus into the cytoplasm. Now, how in the cell this is happening? This was very simplified where you see only one RNA molecule being synthesized, but actually there could be a simultaneous transcription of multiple mRNAs. Okay, so at this region, RNA transcription may have started. In another region also along the length of the DNA, RNA transcription might have started. So there are multiple promoter regions, multiple terminator signals in the same DNA length, in the same DNA strand, and so multiple mRNA molecules could be transcribed at the same time. Now once the mRNA has been made, the mRNA is really long. It's just like the DNA because the DNA are really long molecules. So if you see here, this blue one is the DNA. Okay, now the DNA is made up of some regions which will code for protein and some regions that do not code for protein. Those regions that code for proteins are called exons. Those regions that do not code for proteins are called introns. So there are exon and alternate introns in DNA. So when initially transcription occurs and a pre-mRNA is made, this is the precursor of mRNA, it is an exact copy of the DNA. You see the exon A, the intron 1, the exon B, the intron 2, and the exon C. But it is a waste if the cell has to spend energy to transport this entire RNA out. This is a really long molecule because the introns are not needed. Introns will not be making any proteins. So why don't we do something and just get rid of the introns? So initially, so now this RNA is modified before it is exported out of the nucleus. And those modifications include initially you protect it with a cap. We call it a 5' mRNA cap. You also put a tail on this side, this a 3' poly A tail, and then you clip these introns out. You don't need these introns. So this getting rid of this introns is known as splicing. So then you get rid of the introns and then you join the adjacent exons with each other. So exon A comes right next to exon B and exon C, and you have the cap and the tail. Now this is the mature mRNA. This is the mRNA that will be transported out, and this whole process is known as mRNA processing or the maturing of the message. That means the message that went out of the nucleus, in essence, yes, it has the same message coming from the DNA. It's exactly exon A, exon B, exon C. but it just got rid of whatever was not absolutely essential, okay, and it protected it. Now this RNA you see is going to come out from a nuclear pore. This is the nuclear membrane, and now it goes into the cytoplasm, and in the cytoplasm, proteins will be made following the exact sequence of exon A, exon B, exon C, and so on. Now this language that the mRNA is taking out, okay, this, I told you this was the codons, those 3 subsequent bases. So the entire language is known as the genetic code. The genetic code is the correspondence language between mRNA and proteins, between nucleic acids and proteins. This code is a triplet code, 3 bases, okay, 3 successive mRNA bases. And there are a total of 64 codons. I'll show you in a table, you can arrange these bases in different combinations and you get 64 codons. Out of these 64 codons, there is a starting codon. The starting codon is always AUG. Okay, it will always start at an AUG. And there are 3 stop codons. The stop codons are UAA, UAG, and UGA. These are for translation. That means for making of proteins from RNA. Okay, so whenever proteins have to be made from mRNA, it will always start at AUG, and it will end whenever the sequence on mRNA becomes a UAA or a UAG or a UGA. So let me first show you this table here. This is the genetic code table. This is the total, all the different codons that you see. Now, this is how the codons have been put. If you see, the first letter here can be UCAG, the second letter can be UCAG, and the third letter can be UCAG in different possible combinations. Now, this genetic code is universal. That means in an ant also, if in human beings, if U, this code means the amino acid phenylalanine, then in ants also it is the same, then in a bacteria also it is the same. So it is a universal genetic code, okay? It is non-overlapping. That means a UUU is only phenylalanine. A UUU cannot be a serine, it cannot be a proline, it cannot be a threonine. These are amino acids. These names written here, these are the simplest amino acids, that means the simplest proteins, okay? It is degenerate. Degenerate means 2 or more codons may specify the same amino acids. Those are known as synonymous codons. For example, you see here, UUU codon is a phenylalanine, but UUC is also a phenylalanine. That means if the RNA has a UUU, which amino acid is going to come? Phenylalanine. But if the RNA has a UUC, then which? Again, phenylalanine. Okay, or for example, serine. All these 4 codons code for serine. It could be UCU, it could be UCC, it could be UCA or UCG. So try to understand the difference that when we say it is a degenerate code, means different codons can code for the same amino acid, but the same codon cannot code for different amino acids. A UCU cannot be anything other than a serine. Right? It has to be a serine all the time in all the organisms, but different codons can code for this same amino acid. So this is degenerate and it is universal, it is non-overlapping. So now that you have understood the genetic code or the codons, let's understand translation, how proteins are made from the mRNA that has come out. The mRNA has been copied from DNA, and just we got rid of the introns and we processed it, right? And the T's in DNA got replaced by U's. There is no T in RNA, in mRNA. So translation, that means protein synthesis, involves 3 steps: initiation, elongation, and termination, just like transcription. So how does it start? Now this is the cell and we are focusing on translation. Now think of this green strand as an mRNA that has come out into the cytoplasm. So you see here the translation will always start at AUG. This is where the AUG sequence is. This is the AUG codon. So the codons before the AUG is known as the leader sequence. Now this AUG is going to attract a small ribosomal subunit, small subunit of the ribosome. This comes and attaches here. And the AUG is also attracting a tRNA with an anticodon complementary to AUG, means UAC. It will have to be UAC every time. So the UAC will come, and whenever it is UAC, it will always bring methionine. So methionine is the first amino acid. So the methionine tRNA will come, and you see here it has bound to the mRNA, and this is only the small ribosomal subunit. This is the initiation of translation. Protein synthesis is just starting. And then when the small ribosomal subunit has joined the mRNA, then it is the turn of this large ribosomal subunit also to come and attach here. So now this is the large ribosomal. So the ribosome has been assembled. The AUG has attracted the UAC anticodon, and the first tRNA has brought methionine. Now it is turned for what is the next codon. So the next codon in this sequence is, and it could be different in different sequences, this is GGA. So a different tRNA which has anticodon complementary here, CCU, will bring it here, and this is bringing in an amino acid glycine. Okay, so glycine is brought here. The first site is known as a P site or peptide site. The A is known as an acceptor site. Okay, so at this site, this tRNA is sitting. At the A site, this tRNA is sitting with glycine. So you see two amino acids have already been brought here, and they are side by side. Now a bond forms between these two amino acids, between methionine and glycine. This bond is known as a peptide bond. Now these two amino acids have joined. It's time for the ribosome to move, to start moving to the next codon. Okay, it slides to the next codon, and you see now it is leaving the AUG, going to the other one, the UGU. Okay, so the ribosome moves. When the ribosome moves, this tRNA is kicked out. So this tRNA is ejected, but the amino acid stays here because the amino acid is joined to glycine. It is bonded to the glycine. Now that it moves to the next one, this A site has become available, and it is looking for tRNAs that are complementary, that have complementary anticodons to UGU. So a tRNA with an anticodon ACA is coming here, and it is bringing with itself an amino acid cysteine. So now this one comes here, this one is going to come here, and the peptide bond is going to be formed between glycine and cysteine. You see the glycine and the cysteine have formed, and now this tRNA's job is done. So this tRNA is also kicked out. Now you see a linear chain, simple chain is getting formed. Methionine, glycine, cysteine is here. Now turn for the next codon to get the next anticodon and the next amino acid. So in this way, codon by codon, the ribosome keeps moving. A new codon each time attracts a new transfer RNA with a new anticodon, brings in a new amino acid, and these amino acids get bonded to each other with the help of peptide bonds. And this is how a simplest protein gets synthesized. This will continue until, as the ribosome is moving, it encounters a stop codon, UAA or UGA or UAG. So it has reached UAA. This is a stop codon. So whenever there's a stop codon, there is no transfer RNA that will bring an amino acid. Instead, there would be a release factor, a protein that will signal to this peptide chain, this linear chain of amino acids, that your job is done. Now you go out. So the entire structure is disassembled. The two RNA subunits separate. The mRNA is again, it stays unchanged. It is left there in the cytoplasm. And then this chain of protein has been released. This is a simple type of protein. This is an infant protein. This protein is actually still has to be processed to make it functional, okay? And proteins undergo complicated processing for them to produce your traits, to produce, to do work in the cells. So there are 4 levels of protein structure. The simplest level is called a primary structure. That is the chain of amino acids that you saw. After that, there is secondary, tertiary, and quaternary structures. So this is the primary structure, where it is a simple chain, linear arrangement of amino acids. Then in the secondary structure, this chain can get folded into different types. It can form this helical structure. That time it is known as an alpha helix. And when it forms these, when it gets folded into these structures, there are chemical bonds getting formed. Or it can, fold into a pleated sheet-like structure. It is known as a beta pleated sheet. This is a secondary structure. Then these secondary structures can actually combine to form a tertiary structure. You see an alpha helix and a beta pleated sheet getting bonded, attached to each other with chemical bonds, and they form a more complicated tertiary structure. And when two or more tertiary structures combine, so you see there's one tertiary structure here, another here, another here, another here, they also combine by means of chemical bonds, and they form a quaternary structures. Quaternary structures are the functional forms of proteins. So for a protein to give you your hair color, for the protein to give you your eye color, or for the the widow's peak, the shape of the forehead, or the dimpled chin, all of that has to come from this quaternary structure. Okay, these are too simple of a structure to produce the trait. So protein folding is actually very important for a cell to work normally and for you to stay healthy. If there is any protein misfolding, that could cause a disorder, right? There are different enzymes, there are different chaperone proteins that aid, that help in protein folding. And if there is a misfolding, immediately the cell is notified that a protein has become abnormally folded, and there is a particular response. It's called an unfolded protein response, where the protein synthesis could slow down, could pause, and that misfolded protein that has become abnormal is given a tag. Okay, the tag is a particular thing called ubiquitin, and the ubiquitin is added. So immediately those structures that are going to get rid of the abnormal protein, they know that, okay, this is the abnormal protein. And then the abnormal protein will be escorted by a chaperone protein. It is taken to a structure called the proteasome. And in the proteasome, which is a tunnel-like structure, this protein, the misfolded protein, is inserted through this proteasome. And as the it moves through the tunnel, it is totally dismantled. Okay, and it is converted into its raw material, and it will be reused. So you see here, let's say this is the protein that got misfolded. So now it has been recognized, and this tag has been added, the ubiquitin molecules. And now this ubiquinated protein is passed through this. This is the proteasome, and this is passed through this proteasome. And as it is passing through this proteasome, all of the tertiary structure or secondary structure, whatever had been formed, it is all broken down into its amino acids or small chains of amino acids. And those peptides are released, and peptides would further get converted into amino acids. So it is not just abnormal proteins. Sometimes if proteins have been made in excess, which is not needed, then that protein is also degraded. Anything that is not needed, any protein that is not needed in the cell could be degraded in this manner, in addition to abnormal proteins. Now, whenever there is protein misfolding, as I said, there could be disorders, there could be problems. And there are so many diseases that have already been, research has shown that they're associated with some or the other protein misfolding, in addition to other causes. For example, Alzheimer's disease. There are so many things that cause Alzheimer's. Of course, the genetic contribution, which can cause protein misfolding. There could be copper accumulation there in the brain that also leads to Alzheimer's. So when there is a genetic mutation, what is the protein that gets misfolded? It's an amyloid beta precursor protein. So whenever there's an abnormal folding of this protein, then you find that this could lead to Alzheimer's, because Alzheimer's patient's brain, when it has been analyzed, it has been shown at the molecular level, or biochemical analysis has shown that protein misfolding existed. Or Huntington disease, or Parkinson's disease. Parkinson is a neuromuscular problem. Or phenylketonuria, this is an inborn error of metabolism. Or prion disorders. Prions are really dangerous particles, you can say. Prions, which are prion proteins, these are dangerous because they can fold into any of the several conformations. Okay, it could be a normal conformation, normal structure, it could be an abnormal, and anytime possible it can change into abnormal. And it behaves, this particular protein, prion proteins, they behave like infectious agents. They behave like a bacteria or a virus because they start infecting your healthy cell and start making the proteins abnormal. Okay, So for example, this is a neuron, your nerve cell, the longest cell in your body, and you take some proteins from here. Okay, and these proteins could be, if these are round like these are normal prion proteins in your cells. Now let's say one protein has become abnormal. So then that is known as a scrappy prion protein. And this scrappy prion protein, which is not an infectious agent, it didn't come from outside. Okay, this starts behaving like a bacteria. So any normal protein that it touches, it converts it into an abnormal protein. So when this scrappy protein is coming into contact, you see here it is converting into this molecule. And then it starts, the infection, it increases the infection, and eventually it could convert all of the normal prion proteins into all scrappy prion proteins. And then this cell, when it gets filled with all scrappy prion proteins, is totally infected. It wouldn't behave like a normal healthy neuron. So some prion diseases, they have a specific name. They are called transmissible spongiform encephalopathies, TSEs. So, and these are not only found in human beings, they're found in different species. For example, the scrapie example that I was giving you, it was taken from sheep. There's a kuru type of prion protein in human beings, and so on. And these are some diseases which are caused by prion proteins, prion disorders of human beings. And we're done. Any questions? No questions? So remember, no lecture tomorrow, no lecture day after. You have your midterm. All the best for your midterm exam. And if you face any technical problems, please take a picture so that you have record of that, and you email it to me and CC it to, copy it to UWay, right? And then we'll think of how to make it work for you. Is there a midterm study guide? Yes, there is a midterm study guide. And I think UWay had created a mock exam which will help you do, practice a little bit. If I remember correctly, you can ask her. Tomorrow you have the discussion session. So please talk to her, ask her if she has it, and then you can practice. You at least get an idea of what the midterm would look like. Clear? So let's end the meeting today, and I'll see you guys on Monday next week.